Imagine all of the videos we can make. We'll call it Advanced Perspective. Me and you, Boxman, when we put our minds to something, we can do anything. So in the previous video, we had taken a look at how to set up a 4-point perspective grid, and in this one, I will be using that same grid to create some drawings. Now before we begin, I need to note that this grid allows us to create a 360-degree image, but because a view like that is so, let's say, foreign to our eyes, it can be difficult to process. Instead, it makes more sense to crop this grid down to create a more comprehensible image. For example, here I've cropped this 4-point perspective view to show only one corner of the room and a vanishing point on each wall. Remember, these vanishing points are 90 degrees apart, and so this view is slightly over 90 degrees. This is what I'll be using for my first drawing. Here I printed this out and traced those grid lines onto my paper. Now you're probably wondering what I'm going to draw. Well, I think I mentioned in the previous video that these wide angle views are frequently used when capturing interiors, and so I thought that that would be a good starting point. I'm going to draw a kitchen, and so here I'll put this into a time lapse as I discuss the process. This grid is really useful when creating a drawing like this because not only does it help guide the direction of these lines I'm drawing, it also helps to draw things to scale. And this is because the squares of this grid are all the same size, but you can see how they reduce in size as they recede further into the distance. If I use one of these squares of the grid to construct a box, I can then use another one of these squares anywhere else to construct the same box but in a different location. These boxes, in this case, are kitchen cabinets which I've drawn based on these grid lines. Remember that when drawing with this grid, vertical lines remain vertical, all other lines will converge to a vanishing point. I'll draw some smaller boxes around here as well to finish this off. So that is a fairly simple kitchen drawn in 4-point perspective using the grid that we had constructed. Now this grid can obviously be used in different ways to draw different things. For example, here I'll crop this like so. This time I have 2 corners of the grid shown and our vanishing point will be directly in the center. I'm also going to rotate this grid vertically because yes, that is something that you can also do. I'll then do the same again and trace this grid onto my paper. Now here I'm going to draw something a bit different. An obvious example would have been to draw a very tall building, which I did consider until I had this idea to draw a retro arcade machine. I approach this the same way though, by constructing some boxes and having them follow these grid lines. Because I have rotated this vertically, it's now the horizontal lines which remain horizontal. All other lines converge to vanishing points. There's also some angled planes involved here, like at the front where the controls for this arcade machine are going to go, but the squares for the grid also helped me draw this in. To help make this process even easier, I decided to make this arcade machine 3 grid units wide, the same size as those walls at the back. Essentially, those walls act as the back plane for the box that I had constructed for this. I had a lot of fun drawing this one. Even when adding in these smaller details, you have to obey the rules of perspective and slightly curve your lines. This is a Boxman arcade machine, and so I'll draw him on the screen like this. Speaking of Boxman, I hope he's okay, wherever he might be. So that was a few examples of drawings in 4-point perspective. Before I go, I want to quickly mention that I have recently created an additional tutorial which is available on my Patreon page. Here I create a drawing of the Simpsons kitchen, and of course I explain the entire process in detail. So if that's something that you are interested in, then be sure to have a look. I know this was a rather short video in comparison to some of the others, but there's a lot more to come and I'm aiming to roll these out faster from now on. With that being said, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.